In the summer of 1965, a young social worker named Margaret Henley drove down a dirt road in rural Kentucky that didn't appear on any map. She was following reports of children who had never learned to speak, not because they couldn't, but because no one in their family had spoken a complete sentence in over a century. What she found behind the rusted gate of the Whitman property would haunt her for the rest of her life. The children communicated only through grunts and primitive gestures. Their eyes were too close together. Their skulls were misshapen, and when Margaret asked the oldest member of the family about their condition, the woman simply pointed to a family portrait hanging crooked on the wall. 7 generations of faces that looked disturbingly identical, as if the same person had been photographed over and over across 140 years. Hello everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. The story begins in 1823 when Jeremiah Whitman purchased 847 acres of isolated land in the mountains of eastern Kentucky. The deed, which still exists in the Harlan County Courthouse, shows that Jeremiah paid just $37 for property that other settlers had refused to touch. The land was considered cursed by the Cherokee, who had lived there before them, and local farmers whispered that nothing good would ever grow in that hollow between the mountains. Jeremiah didn't care about superstitions. He was a religious man who believed that isolation from the outside world would protect his family from sin. He built a cabin deep in the woods, accessible only by a single winding path that he deliberately kept hidden from travelers. His wife Sarah bore him 12 children in that cabin, far from doctors, far from neighbors, far from anyone who might question the choices they were about to make. When their eldest son Thomas reached marrying age in 1845, there were no suitable wives within 50 miles of their property. The nearest town was a 3-day journey through treacherous mountain passes. Rather than venture into the outside world, Jeremiah made a decision that would echo through 7 generations. He encouraged Thomas to marry his own sister, Rebecca. The wedding ceremony was conducted by Jeremiah himself, who had declared himself a minister of his own invented faith. No official records exist of this union because no government official was present to witness it. But the family Bible, discovered decades later by investigators, contains an entry in Jeremiah's own handwriting. Thomas wed to Rebecca, both pure of blood and spirit, sealed before God in holy union, May 15, 1845. Rebecca gave birth to 4 children between 1846 and 1852. 3 survived infancy, though neighbors who occasionally spotted them from a distance reported that they appeared strange and not quite right. The children rarely ventured beyond the boundaries of their family's land, and when they did, they communicated primarily through gestures and primitive sounds rather than words. By 1850, the pattern was established. The Whitman family had become a closed genetic loop, with brothers marrying sisters, cousins marrying cousins, and uncles marrying nieces. They justified this practice through their twisted interpretation of biblical scripture, claiming that God intended for them to keep their bloodline pure from the contamination of outsiders. The first signs of genetic deterioration appeared in the 3rd generation around 1875. Children born to the family began displaying what local doctors would later describe as profound developmental abnormalities. Their skulls were elongated and narrow. Their eyes sat too close together, giving them an unsettling, almost predatory appearance. Most disturbing of all, their capacity for speech had begun to disappear. Dr. Edmund Carruthers, the only physician brave enough to venture onto Whitman property during this period, kept detailed notes that were discovered in his personal effects after his death in 1923. His observations paint a disturbing picture of genetic collapse in real time. The children grunt and gesture like animals, he wrote in his journal dated September 12, 1876. They seem to understand simple commands, but I have not heard a single one speak a complete word. The oldest boy, who appears to be about 16, communicates only through pointing and making guttural sounds deep in his throat. What Dr. Carruthers witnessed was the systematic destruction of the family's ability to process language. Inbreeding had damaged the areas of their brains responsible for speech development and linguistic comprehension. Each successive generation showed more severe impairment, as if their DNA was slowly erasing the very qualities that made them human. The family had developed their own primitive form of communication, a series of grunts, gestures, and facial expressions that allowed them to convey basic needs and emotions. An older family member might point to their mouth and make a low moaning sound to indicate hunger. Children would tug on their parents' clothing